This is the journey to finding your line. Now that all the players have racked their tiles, it is time to panic. Kidding. But when you look down at the 13 or 14 if you're East, random tiles that you've been dealt, it looks and feels like utter chaos. That's okay, it's supposed to. We like to say Mahjong is making order out of chaos. We're going to help you figure out how to organize this chaos and set you up for success. Also, remember that all of your opponents are in the same boat. We're going to follow an easy 4-step process to hopefully find our line. Step 1, organize your tiles. We need to see what tiles we have, and the best way to do this is through organization. Organizing your tiles is a total personal preference. It's not an actual rule, but here's what we're going to recommend. First, if you have any flowers, go ahead and put them to the left of your rack. Why am I putting my flowers to the left of my rack? Well, if a flower appears in a line, it's going to appear first in the line. Next, we're going to organize by suit, not by number. I'm going to put all my cracks together in chronological order, followed by all my BAMs, and then all my dots. Why am I organizing by suit and not by number? Well, we must remember that in Mahjong, a 2 BAM is a different tile than a 2 crack, and that is a different tile than a 2 dot. Therefore, if I organize my numbers, I might think that I have more for a line than I actually do. So I'm going to start by putting all of my tiles by suit and placing them in chronological order. If I have any dragons, I recommend placing them at the end of your suit. Keep the family together. So if I have a green dragon, I recommend putting it at the end of my BAMs. If I had a red dragon, I would put that at the end of my cracks. And if I had a soap, I would put those at the end of my dots. Once I have all my suits, I like to have my wins to the right. Then, if I'm lucky enough to be dealt any wild tiles, I like to place those to the far right. One small thing is, as a beginner, I recommend keeping those spaces between your suits so you can see how many suits you have. This is just going to help you see what you have versus if you scrunch them all together. Now, as you progress in Mahjong and skill, I will recommend that you do scrunch all of your tiles together. This is so that your opponents have a harder time reading your hand and predicting the tiles that you want. But I can promise that if you're playing amongst other beginners, these little spaces really are not going to be so much of a game changer, and instead it's just going to help you see what you have. Now that we've organized our tiles, we're on to step 2, which is to look for possible categories. Think back to when we went over the card and we learned that within the card there are different sections. Those sections or categories are going to be themes of your tiles. Now, the first question you should ask yourself is one of those sections or categories blatantly obvious with the tiles in your rack? Was I dealt a whole bunch of evens? Was I dealt a whole bunch of odd tiles? Was I dealt 3 6s and 9s? Do I have a consecutive run with my tiles? If the answer is yes, and I have a very obvious category, that's super exciting and more on the rare side. If I have an obvious section or category, I'm just going to go ahead and start going for that. Now, more often than not, the answer is no. One of those categories is not super obvious. So I'm going to ask myself this next question. Was I dealt any multiples? And when I'm talking about multiples, I'm talking about identical tiles or pairs, pungs, and kongs. For example, was I dealt 2 5 BAMs? This would be identical because they're the exact same tile. Remember that a 5 BAM is different than a 5 crack. Even though they're the same number, they are not the same suit. So they are not considered identical or like tiles. So I'm asking myself, was I dealt any identical tiles? And in this example, I was. So my answer is yes, I was dealt 2 5 BAMs. My follow up question to this is, what are the relatives of these tiles? And why am I wanting to use these tiles? Well, let's think back to our goal in Mahjong, in which we need that combination of 14 tiles. Within that set of 14 tiles, we have groups. And remember that the groups must be identical tiles. Starting off with a multiple is considered an advantage, and we want to try to use tiles towards our first Mahjong. Now, I ask myself, what are the relatives that would go with identical tiles? In this case, I have fives. So I'm going to look to see, where would fives be on the card? Do I have a lot of odds? Because I could use my fives in the odds section. Or can I ask myself, can I use these tiles in a consecutive run? So that would be 5, 6s, 7s. It could be 4, 5, 6s, or 3, 4, 5s. I'm looking at my tiles to see what I could pair with the multiples that I was already dealt. In this case, I noticed that with my 5s, I also have a 4 and a 6 of the same suit. I'm going to go ahead and consider that this is my longest and strongest start to a section. So if the answer was yes, that I was dealt multiples, I'm finding the relatives that go with it. If that answer was no, then I'm just going to look broadly at my hand and I'm going to try to find the longest and strongest start to one of those sections. Remember, your most common sections are going to be the even section, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, the odds, and the consecutive run. So pick the section that you have the most towards and use that as a section or theme that you're going to go with. Hopefully now, after asking all of those questions, everyone has a section or two that they are going for. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to place the tiles that we want to keep to the left of our rack. These are the tiles we're going to use to try and make a line for our winning Mahjong. Next, you're going to make a trash pile. These are the tiles that you know are not going to help you make a line for Mahjong. Place those to the right of your rack. Step 3 is to eliminate categories or sections. There is so much on the card. If you can eliminate some sections, it'll help you focus on a section that will work for you. Step 4, when in doubt, count. As gameplay continues and we continue to draw and discard tiles, eventually your hand will only be made up of tiles that fit in the category you selected. Let's just say, for example, at the beginning stages of the game, I chose to go for the even section. I was collecting even numbered tiles, 2s, 4s, 6s, and 8s. And I was therefore discarding my odd numbered tiles. Eventually, as we continue to draw and discard, what's going to be in my hand? All evens. Now, how do I pick an actual line to go for? This is when we need you to start counting your tiles to see how many tiles you have for those particular lines. For example, I would look at my hand and I would say, okay, how many tiles do I have for this line? Sometimes I recommend for beginners to count their tiles. They can go ahead and place them on the top of their rack and count how many tiles they have out of the 14 towards Mahjong for particular hands. As I'm counting the tiles that I have for a particular line, I want to pick the line that I have the most tiles towards. Once you've chosen your line, then from that point, you have all eyes just on that line, and you know exactly which tiles you need for Mahjong.